There is probably no better man to go through the Tasmanian state election with than Dr. Kevin Bonham, election analyst. Really nice to have you back here.
Thank you, Yo.
So we're in a unusual situation, not entirely unprecedented in terms of an early election in Tasmania. There's been a few in the past few years. This one, of course, just coming barely 12 months after the last one, which is a bit unusual. You don't usually have elections roughly 12 months apart anymore in Australia. In terms of who is kind of the favourite here. I think it's a bit hard to tell on the polling, but you're more of an analyst of that kind of stuff than I am. So, what do you make of kind of where the major parties are set up to, you would think, form or try to form a situation in a hung parliament?
Well, this is very messy. It's actually the shortest term in Tasmania since 1912, 1913. So the major parties currently in support levels in the early polling are both way short of a majority. In Tasmania, because we have Herr Clark, you need to get quite close to 50% to win a majority of seats. You probably need something into the low to mid 40s, and neither of them are getting that at the moment. So unless they improve, we could be looking at a situation where there's another large crossbench and where one or the other major parties has to negotiate their way to victory.
Two polls have come out just before we've spoken. I'll start with the Demos AU one, which has the Liberals ahead. They've got 34%, Labor's 27, the Greens 15, Independents 19, and then you would think just under 5% for the rest. Taken for an unnamed peak body. I know you've had a look at it. What do you make of the poll? It was a sample of, I believe, 4,000, which is not insignificant. So, yeah, what are your thoughts on this poll specifically?
Yes, it was an enormous sample. Part of it was through the EMRS online panel. I think that online panel probably has a high number of highly engaged sort of voters. So that might be behind the very high independent vote that we're seeing in this poll, even though they did try to name independents who were contesting. They did include some who weren't contesting. And a risk with naming independents but not naming party candidates is that the named candidates then get an advantage. It's very hard to poll independents in Herr Clark. But the most noticeable thing about this particular poll was the very poor primary vote for Labor, 26.3%. It was significantly lower than others that are about at the moment.
And the other poll that came out, YouGov, that's the one with Labor ahead. There haven't been that many polls with Labor ahead of the polls that have been conducted over the past term, again, short term. But this one, bit less for the Greens. Gives, again, Labor, you'd think, the better position if you believe the numbers. What did you make of that poll?
Yes, the YouGov poll has Labor ahead 34 to Liberals 31. And my estimate of that is that Labor will come out with about one more seat than the Liberals, although they might not come out with more at all, but probably about one more seat. And that could put Labor in a position where they could govern with perhaps with four independents or perhaps with the Greens, but they've tried to rule out governing with the Greens. So that's just one poll. All these polls are quite early in the campaign still.
The question of how long it would last is a separate one, but in terms of basing your analysis off that poll, you think it is not completely unrealistic that there could be a situation where Labor is able to get over the line purely through independence if they came to the table? Because again, they really, really don't want to go with the Greens. They've been very adamant about that, and I don't think they will unless it's absolutely desperate.
Yeah, it's possible on that poll that Labor will be able to govern without needing the Greens. It's lineball. The problem for them is that if you're governing with Peter George, Craig Garland, and Christie Johnston, for example, that's not wildly different in terms of issue priorities to governing with the Greens, and it might throw up similar challenges, and it might encounter a similar public perception.
What independence should we really be looking at in terms of realistic chances and important for minority government?
There's a lot of independents running in this election. There's 44, which is a record by far. The most significant ones on the radar at the moment, firstly the incumbents, David O'Byrne, Christie Johnston, and Craig Garland, who were all elected as independents last election. Then Rebecca Pentland, who was elected as a JLN member, is running as an independent with an apparent degree of coordination with the Liberal campaign, and she is running from the ungrouped column in Bass, which is unusual. No one has won from the ungrouped column since 1959, and other Peter George is the another significant one because he polled over 20% in Franklin in the federal election. I don't expect that he'll get anything like that in the state election, but he doesn't need to. And another significant one is Elise Archer, the former Liberal Attorney General, who is running as an independent in Clark and is running as a moderate, having been known as a conservative Liberal for most of her career.
The Nationals, of course, have got two MPs now, thanks to two former JLN members here. Now, look, the Nationals have not. I mean, I've always thought, they don't do well in elections, but I think it's forgotten they don't actually contest many elections. They didn't contest state level for a decade. Before that, it was, I think, the 90s was the last time they had it. Before that, it was a few decades. And they've really come and gone in terms of their existence. There was the brief resurgence around the 2019 federal election. You've kind of followed their existence for a bit, and it has been strange. We spoke to Carl Cooper from the party, and we basically was talking about, it was administered from the mainland, but we really haven't heard about what they've been doing, who's kind of involved. What do you know about the Tasmanian Nationals?
So there was an attempt for the 2014 Tasmanian state election, which Alison Ritchie, former Labor MLC, was involved in, and that ended up being disaffiliated by the federal branch because some of them were saying strange things, and ran with very little success. They were still able to run under the Tasmanian Nationals name, even though they actually had nothing to do with the federal party by the end. Then there was the attempt in 2019, which was surrounding Steve Martin, who had joined the Nationals after being elected to the Senate when Jackie Lambi was disqualified. And some of the people who were involved in this attempt were also involved in the 2019 attempt. We also have a list of their members that was, in fact, two lists that were published late last year when they were applying for registration. So we know that former Liberal John Tucker is one of their candidates and is one of their founding members, or one of their registration members, and Lara Alexander, who was a fellow Liberal defector who, with Tucker, helped trigger the last election, is also a member of the Nationals, but is not a candidate for this election. So they pop up now and then and usually fail to have much impact. My theory on this is that the Nationals idea just doesn't work very well in Tasmania because you don't have such discrete bush areas as you do on the Australian mainland. So everything's sort of more closely connected, and people, the Liberal Party is more established in the rural areas. As to how it goes, this is different in that they do have two incumbents and one former incumbent, but the incumbents they have were people who got elected under the Jackie Lambi banner, and that was mostly just voters voting for the Lambi brand. It's not like these candidates have much of a profile in their own right.
The Lambi brand, of course, did still get 6.7% at the last state election. Not an insignificant amount at all. Where do you see that vote ending up?
I suspect the Lambi vote's going to scatter. Some of it will go to the Nationals. Some of it will go back to the major parties. Some of it will go to independents, especially in Braddon. I suspect that some of it's going to go to Garland. But it's going to go all over the place.
On the Liberal side of things there, they've got a higher profile candidate in recently defeated federal MP Bridget Archer. I've seen the comments that, okay, well, she just lost at the state, she just lost at the federal election. Why would she think she's got a chance? Now, I know why those arguments might be wrong, apart from the fact, or excluding the fact that even there is Hare Clark at this election. But you would think with her kind of high profile that she shouldn't have too much of a challenge getting up in Bass at the state level.
Yeah, former federal MPs have a very good record of getting elected into Tasmanian state parliament, especially when they're only recently out of federal parliament. There are some exceptions. Justine Kay failed to get elected as a Labor MP in Braddon, but generally they do well. Gavin Pearce in Braddon running for the state seat after retiring from federal parliament is another interesting one. He's a strong chance.
And in terms of where Labor goes from here, they have obviously had many, many elections where they haven't been able to break through. We've talked before about kind of what they would need in a hung parliament situation. That'll of course be dependent on final numbers, which we can't perfectly predict the future here. Where are their strongest areas for a pickup? We're talking 7-member electorate here. Of course, it was re-expanded a few years ago. Where could they actually make a dent and pick up one of those seats that you would think are desperately needed? Because on their current numbers, it seems virtually impossible to hold together an even remotely stable government.
They have some prospect for picking up a seat everywhere, but even if they pick up one in each electorate, that's still only 15 and still leaves them three short of a majority. So that's an idea of how hard it is for them to get a really easy situation. Lions, they have the advantage that the Lambi ticket that competed with them at last election is gone, so they may well think that they have a chance in Lions where they're running Brian Mitchell, also a recently retired federal MP. They are running quite strong third candidates in Clark, in Luke Martin, and Franklin in Jess Monday. So those are the seats that they may look to pick up. But Franklin is a very competitive electorate with a number of people who are vying for seats who could win. It's like there's sort of at least 9, if not 10, serious contenders for 7 seats.
And just finally, we obviously saw at the federal election the Liberals unable to win any House of Rep seats in Tasmania. So it's 4 Labor and 1 Independent. Their statewide vote fell. You can see that in the Senate results. Look, you and I both know that comparing federal to state is far from a perfect thing to do. Is there any usefulness at all, though, at looking at the federal numbers when people are thinking of who could win at the state level?
Okay, so one thing here is the big swing at the federal level. Should we expect such a big swing at the state level too? The risk with that is that there was a big swing at the state level last year as well. So any sort of brand damage to the Liberals that might be floating around at both levels is already baked in. The question of federal relevance, I suppose what we would say from the federal election is that it shows that Labor's brand is not damaged beyond repair in Tasmania. Labor is capable of having strong results here and doing well, but that doesn't necessarily apply at the state level. Tasmanian voters do quite strongly separate between state and federal politics from time to time, as do voters in many other states.
All right, well, we'll keep following it very closely, as I know you will. Dr. Kevin Bonham, thank you, as always, for your time.
Thanks very much.